More now on our top story, the fishery dispute in Nova Scotia. The federal government is urging police in the region to keep the peace as tensions sparked violence this week. This was the scene yesterday in New Edinburgh. Fishermen clashed with the local Mi'kmaq First Nations chief outside a lobster pound used by his band. On Tuesday, several hundred fishermen and their supporters raided two facilities where Mi'kmaq fishermen were storing their catches. By morning, a van had been set ablaze, hundreds of dead lobsters were strewn over the ground, and one facility had been damaged. No arrests have been made. Tensions have escalated ever since the band started their own lobster business outside of the federally regulated lobster season last month. They did so citing a 1999 Supreme Court decision that ruled they have a right to fish for their moderate livelihood. Mike Sack is the chief of Sipekne'katik First Nation. He joins us from Digby, Nova Scotia. Hi, Chief Sack. Good to see you. Thank you for making time.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
I wanted to start off. We've obviously seen some of the video and the scenes unfold. It's really hard and troubling to watch. There has been, multiple incidents over the past few days. How worried are you that this continues?
Very worried. It's been a big concern of ours for the safety. We didn't come here at all to fight with anyone, and we're not here to do that. We're here to fight and exercise for our right, and that is it.
You've also expressed concern, of course, about the way in which the RCMP was, or rather wasn't, kind of present during some of what's unfolded. Have you spoken to the RCMP? Do you have any assurances that you will have protection if there is a next time?
I spoke to some RCMP constables on the ground to reaffirm them that they are doing a great job of what they have. Our frustration is with the higher levels of government dispatching the members to the area. We haven't heard from any RCMP in a number of days. It's very discouraging how our safety is not a priority in their minds.
And when you say their minds, do you mean the RCMP or the government?
I take it right up the line. It's we're not getting anywhere with the RCMP. The commissioner, they send out 12 RCMP officers when there's 300 commercial fishermen that are there at the wharf angry, which they stand by. Every event that happened that night with the burning of vehicles, the demolition, the destruction of property, RCMP was there watching.
We asked the Minister of Indigenous Services, Mark Miller. We had Mr. Miller on earlier on in the show, and I asked him about whether or not there's been any conversation with the RCMP or the Nova Scotia government, who has jurisdiction over local RCMP. Like, will there be more presence in case this happens again? He said his expectations are that there will be. Do you have any, are you optimistic that will be the case, or are you still worried that you're going to face the same situation?
I was optimistic the other morning after it all unfolded. And as the day went on, we were promised more RCMP officers were being deployed to the area, which didn't happen. So at this point, I have no choice. I have no faith in the RCMP to protect us or to look out for our best interest.
So what do you do?
That's what we're stuck with. Today I've been on the phone with ministers and trying to put pressure all the way up the line to why are our lives less valuable? You know what I mean? Like, how do RCMP officers stand by and let these hate crimes happen right in front of them? And all I could say is we don't have enough officers.
You've also said in your remarks after this that, and we've seen tweets and statements put out by various government officials that, and I'm paraphrasing, but that you don't want there to be just tweets. You'd like more action. Can you tell me exactly what you're hoping to see from, for example, the federal government?
Yeah, I would like to see enough enforcement in the area that contains everything. And, we're down here. We have a right to be so and to exercise our right. We have a right to self-govern our fisheries. That's what we're doing. We're doing nothing wrong. You have commercial fishermen in the area that do not agree with what we're doing. And they said that they're going to take the law into their own hands. And that's what they're doing. And they're getting away with it. I just cannot believe how this is going. I know if we had a number of people on the wharf, there would be squad crews there, riot gear. It's just systemic racism at its finest.
Minister Miller said that there's conversations taking place between all sides, including the DFO, the federal government, that is, to try and arrive at, a clear definition that can be agreed upon, I guess. I don't know if that's the right term, but of what a moderate livelihood is. Do you feel that those discussions are happening in earnest?
Not at all. We're 21 years late, I guess, right? So those conversations should have happened a long time ago. I think that it almost seems that the longer they put it off, the less they have to worry about it. So not the case. We're here. We're going to define it, and we'll move forward as a nation to nation.
Are there conversations, to your knowledge, happening with the federal government at all?
In regards from us?
Yeah, like with you, with others, like is that to try and figure out a solution to all of this, or are things sort of at a stalemate?
Yeah, so we have our continued dialogue and conversations with DFO and Minister Jordan. Those are continuing on. It's just the immediate safety is what our main concern is switched to. And we actually had a call today to further our plan and to discuss moving forward with a joint science between us and the Government of Canada or DFO to ensure the safety and the longevity of the lobsters and the species itself.
And do you think that's close to actually happening?
Well, that was my focus point today, was deadlines. I want to see deadlines like, never mind, we'll talk next week and so forth. I want to have hard deadlines to meet and to roll it out. And I'm pushing for that every day.
Okay, Chief, I'll leave it there. I wish you the best and stay safe.
Thank you.
Here to respond is Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller. He's with us in Ottawa. Hi, Minister Miller. Good to see you. Thank you for making the time.
Hi, Ashley. Thank you.
I do want to ask you about the federal government's role, but I want to start with that video because I know you've seen it and you've already said that you were alarmed by it. What alarmed you in that video?
Well, this is the entirely unacceptable use of violence and destruction, wanton destruction of property in a situation where we all clearly saw the police forces that are supposed to protect us being overwhelmed. This is an assault, and then the subsequent assault on Chief Sek, which is not only an assault on him, but the entire Mi'kmaq people. Mi'kmaq have a right to a moderate livelihood, as you mentioned in the introduction. This is a right that has been affirmed since 1999. It's a right that exists since 1760. It has been tested throughout history in various industries, so eel in the case of the Marshall case, but also with respect to lobster, which has become a very lucrative industry in the last few years, where it was not so in the past. So there's lots of interest at play. The point here is that the Mi'kmaq people have a right to a moderate livelihood. This is something that is subject to regulation, and it needs to continue along the path that we've created with respect to getting to the table with DFO and ironing out what exactly that means, so the Mi'kmaq people can have that right crystallized and be able to do so in peace. Fishing is dangerous, and if people get hurt on the seas, there's a high potentiality for grave injury and death, and this is something that we're all worried about. And when we ask our police forces to do their job, it is something that they obviously take quite seriously, but they have to ensure that the peace is kept.
Do you think that they did that they've done that? Do you think the RCMP is doing their job?
Well, look, I think the videos spoke for itself. Up to date, I had seen pretty good work done by the RCMP in this particular conflict. What we saw a couple nights ago were police forces being overwhelmed. Now, my full expectation and the expectation of the federal government is that presence get ramped up and that they do what they've sworn to do, which is to serve and protect and hold the peace. And again, it bears reminding that this is a provincially delegated entity under the control, but independent because it is a police force of the Nova Scotia government. So should there be a request and a need for the federal government to do more, that request can be made by Nova Scotia, but our full understanding in working with the Nova Scotia government is that police force and presence be increased.
So just to be clear, that request has not come through the Nova Scotia government?
We have not received a request from the Nova Scotia government that they need more help. My understanding is and our expectation is that they will be increasing their presence.
So when you say that's your expectation, I mean, I just want to make sure, because the government so far, including Minister Bill Blair, Public Safety Minister, has said that this is not the federal government's jurisdiction. Clearly those affected, including Chief Mike Sack, think that there is a role for the federal government here in making sure everyone involved is protected.
Well, the way we do that is that we ensure that should Nova Scotia require more resources, that they do so and clearly express so. This has not been the case. It has not been made. And our full expectations is that the next time something like this occurs, the police will, and shall intervene to keep the peace.
Chief Mike Sack said that the way that the RCMP have acted thus far is an example of systemic racism. Do you agree with that assessment?
Vashi, I think we've been at pains to speak to Canadians to systemic racism within police forces across this country. It is something that is pervasive and needs to be weeded out. It is not something that is easily fixed overnight, nor necessarily accomplished by sanctioning one or two individuals. It is something that needs to be done in reforming the way we use the spectrum of the use of force that has disproportionately affected Indigenous peoples and the resulting outcomes, which is increased incarceration across this country. I will never deny the need to do more and to intervene in a way that looks at the full review of how the RCMP acts, and indeed this was reiterated in the throne speech a couple of weeks ago.
My question, though, is whether or not what we witnessed over the past 2 days is an example of that.
But I can't speak to what I saw other than what I saw on video. I did see a police force getting overwhelmed. I'd be glad to speak with Chief Sack, and he was assaulted yesterday, and it didn't look like he was protected. So I actually salute his courage to be able to come out today and to speak so articulately on the matter, but it is very difficult for me to say more without having gotten the entirety of the events that went on.
You referenced the path sort of forward, right? And at the heart of it, I just want to make sure that our viewers understand is this definition of moderate livelihood, right? How that through regulation it needs to be interpreted based on that court decision from so many years ago. There are, sort of broad conversations happening, or we're being told that DFO is at the table, Minister Jordan is at the table, but we haven't really got a lot of specifics. Like what is actually happening right now? Where do those talks stand? Are they actually happening?
Well, frankly, there's a reason you don't have specifics, because these are nation-to-nation discussions between the Canadian government and the Mi'kmaq people. And there are conversations for information going on a daily basis with DFO. Obviously, events like these challenge them. The space needs to be created to be able to speak with them when people's emotions are not running high. But again, in the course of history of this right, it is certainly one that's been tested on many occasions, and there's never been a clear crystallization of that right, and that is what we are attempting to do with respect to, in particular, lobster fishery.
The reason, Minister, I'm asking for some specifics is because of what your government is being accused of. For example, by Chief Mike Sack, who sort of denounced the Prime Minister's tweets and said, actions speak louder than words, don't just tweet about it. So and the Premier of Nova Scotia is saying that that DFO is missing right now from the conversation. So the accusation is being leveled at your government that you're not doing enough to arrive at some sort of solution here. And I'm just asking, tell us what you are doing.
Well, when there are events of this nature, we do have to call them out. I think that's very important. Canadians expect the federal government to have that moral authority. But additionally, they expect them to act. And I think this is what Chief Sack is saying. We are at the table. I am told by DFO on a daily basis, and talks are progressing. They are not easy. They are made a lot less easy with events like these, but I want to be clear, events of violence will not fetter a right that is enfranchised by a Supreme Court decision, and a right that the Mi'kmaq are entitled to exercise. But there is a process by which we need to get together with cool minds and iron out what exactly that means. And
that process is taking place right now?
It is.
And are there sort of cooler minds present? Like, are those talks progressing at all? Because what we see is obviously not on the inside of those conversations, as you describe, rightfully so. But what we do see, what Canadians are seeing, of course, is what's happening, what's unfolding in Nova Scotia, which is pretty troubling, right? Which doesn't present the view that things are close to a resolution.
Well, even going back to the Marshall decision, there were real objections, in part by Commissioner Fisherman, to the result of the decision by the Supreme Court. This is something that has never necessarily been accepted and contested. There is issues with respect to conservation. There are issues with respect to money to be made. But all that being said, there is a right that exists. It needs to be respected, and it is a right that will be ironed out with the Mi'kmaq people and the Government of Canada in talks that are not necessarily ventilated in the public domain.
So we just won't know.
And assure Canadians that these things are ongoing. People not at the speed people may like, but they are ongoing, and we are resolute in resolving them.
Okay, before I let you go, Minister, I wanted to ask you about something that's happening coming up in the future. And tomorrow, actually, you and your cabinet colleague, Minister Bennett, are going to be holding meetings on healthcare racism, in part spurred by, of course, what happened to Joyce Ekakwan, an Indigenous woman who we know, thanks to her own videos, was horribly mistreated in a hospital, in the Joliet Hospital, before she passed away. I wanted to sort of jump off something that we had spoken about earlier in this interview around systemic racism, because the Premier of Quebec has yet to acknowledge that systemic racism, or has so far refused to acknowledge that systemic racism played a part in what unfolded in that hospital room. Is that a problem? If you're geared at looking at solutions with this meeting, if you're geared at trying to root out this issue, is it a problem that the Premier of the province, and this is healthcare is a provincial jurisdiction, won't admit that systemic racism was a part of this?
Certainly doesn't help, but I think you hit the nail on the head. The government of Canada can't fire doctors, and it can't address professional standards. These are all things that fall within provincial regulation. What I do need, and what I'll spend less of my time doing, is calling people out and asking them to come to the table and deal with an issue which is still very raw, particularly for the Sipekne'katik people and the family of Joyce Ekakwan, and addressing an issue that is pervasive in the industry. We know that racism kills, and systemic racism kills systematically. If you can't acknowledge the problem, you can address it from a public policy perspective in order to weed it out. Implicit bias can result in outcomes that can lead to people's death, and we need to recognize that. We need to foster that environment to speak without judging, and getting out there and ensuring that doctors and professional orders of nurses and doctors can have training standards, cultural sensitivity standards, that we have an enforcement mechanism within hospitals and the health medical system to make sure that the Indigenous peoples are treated with first-class medical care that you and I enjoy, but they don't, and lives are at risk. And so this is a conversation. It's naive to think that everything will be fixed by Friday afternoon. That's clear.
For sure, yeah.
But what we can do is bring everyone together and have a clear pathway forward as we progress as a nation. We owe it to all Canadians to do so.
Do you feel, though, Minister, that you have a partner in the way that you describe what you hope the efforts to be in the Premier of Quebec in that?
Quebecers have big hearts. They are seized to this issue and torn by what they saw on video. It isn't something new. There's a body of work that has underscored it. I'm confident that the Quebec government, and I need the Quebec government to be with me in order to change something in this country that is entirely unacceptable. And I have confidence in the Quebec government, and I have even more confidence in the people of Quebec.
Okay, Minister, I'll leave it there. Thank you for your time this evening. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Vashi.
Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller here in Ottawa. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.